Greebos, and welcome to the Orc Fort Podcast, a podcast where we discuss all things Ultima Online through the eyes of Orc role players. I'm your host, Xu'rek, and today I have a very special guest, Mr. Nero himself. Nero and I do a pretty deep dive into the history of Ultima Online, the history of our clan, his role in it as an elder, and so much more. It's a great episode, so I encourage you to grab your bottle of grog, sharpen that blood axe, and please march on into the Orc Fort. Sit down next to the big old campfire and enjoy today's episode. All right, Nee, welcome to the Orc Fort Podcast, man. It's a pleasure to have you. How you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm pretty good. I can't lie to you. I am excited. I'm very excited for this episode. I think it's a long time coming, and I'm excited to get to do it with you. But before we get started on some things, I want to give you a chance to sort of introduce yourself to the listener.
All right. Well, I am Nerul. I've played with Bloodrock clan since late of 1999. I started off as a mage, and I'm still a mage, but I'm now an elder. I went through a series of different titles, and now I'm one of the elders in the clan, and I just help guide it. And that's essentially the gist on what I do within the clan.
I know some listeners are like, 1999, god damn, right? That's you old as hell. But most of us are a little bit older. We've been gaming a long time. But it's just crazy how we're still here. Nee, you say it all the time. We're not supposed to be here, but here we are, man, 2025.
That's right. We're not supposed to be here. Somehow we've survived. We're the only surviving OSI orc clan around. We're the last ones around. And we have a lot of orcs from different clans still coming to us because we're a bastion of the last surviving OSI orc clan. And they're helping us shape ourselves. And we are just somehow still alive. And I would like to say we're probably more active than ever right now. We are just kicking butt.
Yeah,
and it's
crazy.
Just, I'm surprised. It's really flabbergasting on how awesome that is.
Yeah, it looks a little different, right? It looks a little different because it has to. We've done the right thing in adjusting and adapting, but the core stuff we keep to ourselves. So we'll cover that a little bit here. But before we start talking about what it was today, I want to sort of take you back in time a little bit, walk you down memory lane here. I want to hear your UO story. When did you first hear the words Ultima Online? What got you in the game? What were those early days like for you?
Oh boy. So my older brothers, one of them was like into like Wolfenstein, and older games like King's Quest, Quest for Glory. And we've always been Dungeons and Dragons fans. And he came across it in a magazine like, oh my God, in this game, you can tame things and you can, things like replicate, like in those old books, they used to say that the spawn, like the deers would like replicate and shit like that. And it was like one of the first things of Ultima Online to be released. Like it was just amazing on how there's going to be so many players on this world. And there's tailoring, there's craftsmanship, there's all kinds of shit. And when the game released, we bought it. I don't remember where, but it must have been probably like Walmart or some shit.
Yeah, Walmart.
And I remember the back of the box had like dragons breathing fire and like, plate mailed warriors fighting them. I was like, holy fuck, this looks like it's, I was a kid, but it was awesome looking. And installed it. There was a monthly subscription, and it turned out to be digital crack. Like I couldn't, once I logged on, I couldn't get my fucking hands off the game. It was a problem. It was a real fucking problem. Like all of a sudden I became an addict to the games. And so that's how I found Ultima Online pretty much. And I found the orcs around the time Furbies came out.
Furbies, oh my God, that's way back, dude.
Around the time Furbies came out, and I remember that because it was some kid brought a fucking Furby on the bus the day before, and I think I remember throwing the Furby out the window, and it was like, and it like crashed on, it rolled around and shit. And then, the following night I found Bloodrock clan, and we'll get into that later. But that Furby being thrown out the window is a good way of remembering, and that was around '98, late '98 time when Furbies came
R.I.P.
out.
Furby, man. God damn. No, I think you said something I want to touch on, which is the back of the box, and I think the concept in general. It taps into something every person probably listening to this, or if they're not Ultima players, at least they have an interest in general fantasy. It taps into something that for us is essential, right? It's that it's an open world where we can be whoever we want to be, right? Do we want to be the dude fighting the dragon? Do we want to be the best blacksmith? Do we want? I mean, for those of you who don't play Ultima Online, what he just described is sort of the foundation of what the game is. It's a true sandbox. You can be whoever you want.
Well, sometimes you log on and you don't know what the fuck you want to be. You know, as soon as you hit the character creation, you're like, okay, what's my name? And then you just sit there and wonder, like, what the, you know, especially if you have a purpose, right. Especially if you don't know what the hell the game's about. So then you see characters running around with the goofiest names and shit like that. They have no sense of direction, so they just go on the whim. And you see them all the time in Ultima, you know, like toilet plunger. You know, like
correct, yeah. Yeah, and early on especially, and I don't know about uni, but I mean, my guy was a swordsmith, blacksmith, archer, fucking carpenter, you know, everything really shitty.
Yeah, and back then, I mean, I remember like logging on, running on the road, and there'd be like a series of newbies fighting a troll with like shitty weapons, and the troll was a badass. He'd be like kicking these like newbies' asses and stuff, and I still vividly remember this, where like they were like, no one was on a horseback. If you're on a horseback, you were a badass because somehow you found a horse and you got your taming or something, or you got 700 gold. Jesus.
Yeah, you're a rich dude. I remember for like the first like, maybe 3 weeks of the game, I didn't know there was a bank box. So I would spawn in and I thought the game was I had to hold all my shit in my backpack. And so I would just die and then I'd lose it all, you know, then it's back to square one. But yeah, those stories are hilarious, man, the early days.
Yeah, and it's wondrous because like no one knew what the hell was going on. I didn't even know you could cross heal, you know. And remember when you had to cut bandages one at a time? You just like literally sit there and cut a bandage. And when you died, you had to do it all over again. And there were macros and shit, you know?
Yeah. And I remember buying a full set of armor from the vendor was a big deal for me, you know, when I gathered enough gold to be able to afford that stuff. And
it's a big deal.
And it taps into what I think the essence of what we are, what captivates us about Bloodrock, and that's we don't need the shiny stuff. You know, it's the experience, it's the adventure. And, you know, that kind of segues onto the next topic I want to kind of discuss. So you're back, Furby's out the window. You're fully addicted, right? You're in. You come across these orcs the next day. What was that like? How did it happen? What captivated you about these crazy dudes speaking Orcish?
Right on. So I played in Delucia on Great Lakes, and I lived in Delucia. Everybody lived in a town back in those days. It's like you pick the town, and that's where you fucking lived. And then every now and then you visit other towns. Oh, those are the Britannia people. Oh, those are the fucking people who live in Minnock.
Yeah,
you know, every town had a clique all back then. Every single town had a clique. And I just so happened to live in Delucia. And I would go to the Liches. I was a mage. Luigi, I had another character named Raph, and I played them both on and off. But I found Bloodrock with Luigi, and I would go to the Liches before and, you know, farm them and go to town, sell shit, kill the damn cows, you know, fuck around, you know, be a little shithead and stuff. And I found the orcs in Serpent's Hold. This is where they begin, because I don't know how the fuck I got to Serpent's Hold. And I saw a group of orcs running. It was like Morglum, you know, which is like the mage of the magic god, Krulnuk. And I saw Bidash, like the mage of the blood god called Krenbluck. And I saw Trug, and I think I saw Xu'rek. I saw Gragdash, and all these other names that I can remember now. There was probably like 20-ish orcs running around Serpent's Hold, and they were saying, ho, 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 ho. I'm like, what the fuck is this shit?
Yeah.
What the fuck is that? What is that? So then I follow those guys, and, you know, there was like, you know, one mage, two mages, you know, teleporting and casting portals. They poured into the portal. I'm like, all right, I gotta follow these guys. I followed them. I went to the fort, and I was just kind of like a deer in the headlights, just like mesmerized, like, what the fuck is this? They killed me. And that's all I remember. Then I remember somehow, you know, wanting to make an orc, wanting to figure out what the hell this was all about. I found him again, I was asking questions, found where they lived. Back in those days, you could click on journals, and the journals, they used to type out their whole entire like character bio in their journals. On Outlands, when you click on a journal, you can't really scroll down. They neutered it. I wish they would fix that. But anyway, so like on Great Lakes, they would write out a whole journal, and some of them had a website on it. Like after a long story of their profile, right. The website, I visited bloodrock.org or whatever it was, bloodrockclanetworks.org, and I found they had a language. I literally printed the language out. I took it to school. I studied the living fuck out of it. Eventually, I created a character, named the rule. I got the name from my brother's Dungeons and Dragons book because I wanted to make a mage of the god of death. I wanted to worship the god of death, so I chose the god of death in Dungeons and Dragons called Nerul because I wanted to be a Belloc mage. And this was before I even knew that you had to ask permission to make a mage, right?
Yeah, for the listeners, we're probably the strictest guild out there when it comes to ranks and permissions to do things, and magery is coveted. So they wouldn't fly these days, but Nero snuck in back in the day.
Yeah, I slipped in. I remember like getting there, and there was an orc named Porp. He was like a newer mage orc, like, and well, no, he wasn't a red robe. He wasn't an orange robe, actually. There were others, and in orange robes, and that signifies you were a young mage. And I met him, and I heard him say an orcish bad word you're not supposed to type in the game. He created it. I don't know. We'll talk about that if you want to, but fuck it, nah. So, and I slipped in, man. They somehow liked me enough to give it a pass. And now if someone tries making an orc mage today in 2025, we don't allow anyone to show up as a mage. We don't, that doesn't fucking happen. You better earn it through scars, and we'll talk about that later. But yeah, I slipped in, man. I got lucky. They liked me enough.
Well, let me ask you this, and you said, it was about 20 of them and something about it, but big guilds were around back in 99, right? So it wasn't just the size of the orcs. There was something different about these guys, and I think it was that you might have picked up on, maybe you didn't know exactly what, but these guys were actually role-playing, right? And maybe there's something to that, right? Because at those days, I know that there was other pretty mega big guilds, quote-unquote mega big guilds at the time. But these guys were like truly role-playing.
Yeah, the thing is, there were a lot of guilds, and there were mega big guilds, but they kind of all like blended in together. There wasn't anything like stuck out from them, you know what I mean?
Right.
These guys stuck out like a sore thumb. I'm like, what the fuck is that? You know, like I don't want to be in this like just a warm Luke guild that does the same thing everyone else does. I only have a finite amount of time. I'd rather be in something extreme, like the orcs over there. That's fucking rad, you know?
Right. And the thing is that another thing, even from the beginning, they're doing things. They're playing the game sort of, and we've talked about this before. And back in those days, there was probably more role play among the early crowd, right? You mentioned it in conversation with me where if you're traveling down the road, people will say hell.
Yes.
And just light RP here and there, but they were in that state of mind.
Yeah, there was a lot more realism in the world. I don't even want to call it a game because at that time you were into it so much that it was another world, and people would bow to each other on the roads. I remember it like hail. It was a common thing humans would say to each other, hail, hail, and then they would go about their business. There was a nighttime, like the sun would fucking set. It would get dark. All of a sudden, you would see torches and candles, fucking newbies with their little shitty candle they start with, walking around in little circles of light. That was sick because there was immersion. There was a lot more realisticness back then. Right now in Outlands, it's more like an arcade game. But back then, it was more like a world you were entering, and a lot more, you got into it more, immersion.
Dude, the fucking Umi candle, the starter candle, Jesus, man, if those guys walking around. I remember even those days, if you remember, and this might have been a later edition, but I don't know, but...
I don't want to, I interrupted you. Sorry, I got in your way. I'm like, okay, sorry. So
it's all good, man. It's all. I was just. You're bringing me back, man. Bringing me back.
So I remember going in like Death Star, and like it was so dark in there, you'd have to like you remember that spinny little fucking wheel you got on your monitor, and you could make the screen brighter. Well,
Yes.
if you didn't have your little shitty candle and you didn't have major, you'd have to like scroll that wheel so you could like see the
Oh,
outskirts of the sword. And there was no razor you could hit that would light levels. That didn't exist. It got scary.
yeah. I remember having to look at my monitor from different angles and shit, trying to see if I could see things. Uh, dude. And I remember people would take. You remember the blacksmith sitters at the smith shop in towns and shit. I remember in Brit they'd hang out there and offer repair services, and you'd kind of haggle them.
Yep. I remember that, and they would repair your shit. They would repair your
Yeah.
shit. That was amazing. And I heard at the Bloodrock Fort and other clans would do the same thing. I remember hearing stories of orcs going up to repair their shit. Mages back then didn't even have to wear leather armor. Mind the listener, back in like 98, 97-ish, around those times, T2A time frame, mages didn't wear armor. They wore cloth, a whole shitload of cloth, like Gandalf and shit, just cloth. And that made sense to me because, a warrior should be able to slice through a fucking mage, and the mage uses reactive armor and, like, teleports around and casts spells. To me, that makes sense. But, yeah, the repairing thing at the smithy, totally a thing. And I miss that. I miss that communal type of deal.
Yeah, I remember, and it would be like a so back and I remember, and I was a shithead, right? But I remember I made a transaction and I was low on funds, man. I was poor, man. Don't blame me, but I did a shitty thing where basically you had to hand them the armor, they repaired it, and then they had to give it back to you. So
You have
these
to
guys are trustworthy, right?
trusty blacksmith because I guess they were like just like there's dodgy mechanics out there that
Oh,
fuck your shit up.
I was a fake dude. I put on an apron.
Oh,
Put
man.
on an apron, stood by the smith, and was like free repairs, and dudes would just give me their armor, and I just run off.
Hey, I remember seeing like people that would like they would sell black dye tubs, right? So they would get like cloth and like put it in a bag over the dye tub and pretend it was like a black dye tub, unless like you clicked on the fucking tub. It's like, wait a minute, that's a piece of cloth over the dye, you fucking scammer. And then they would like run off, recall, you'd never see him again.
Yeah, man, it was crazy. Those times were, and you know what's one thing I always talk about? I mean, this is all before voice chat.
Yeah, this was before voice chat. So that means a lot of different things. So that means all the humans are using their keyboards to talk. You see text everywhere. You go to the bank, there's fucking people spamming whatever they're selling. There's other people having conversations. You could follow people and kind of like eavesdrop to figure out where they're going and how you're gonna like kill them later. It was you had to type orcs. Remember how I told you I had to print out the language?
Right.
There was no voice chat that we use today, and we can talk about that later. But like on how we use voice chat today and things. But like you had to communicate in the game all the time, even in battle. You'd have to communicate in Orcish in battle to box, which we call crimp, where you surround the human and you type in crimp, and you box them. Humans would say box back then. Literally, like, and a lot of listeners that played back then can remember this. Like, you would yell out box, and you would surround people so you can kill them. And we would do the same and call it crimp, and we would surround them and kill them. And you would have to type during combat instead of using Roger Wilco that appeared later on. Like a little later on, people got smart. They started using Roger Wilco and shit. But there was a time where 99% of all players typed in game. And those times, they were special. And also, you would also, like, there weren't as many people using macros like for pots and shit like that. Like,
don't get me started. Yeah.
or whatever the fuck they used at first. I didn't use it. But, like, dude, I would have to put all my pots in a corner of my bag and just click them. And something about that kind of felt like you're grabbing the pot and drinking it because you have to reach for it with the mouse and click it, and then you drink it versus just hitting a button, which,
Yeah, or fucking a script that does it for you automatically. But that's a whole, we won't go down that rabbit hole. But one of the things I always say, and I think you agree with me from a previous comment you've made, but there's something that sort of ruins the RP for me when I hear another player's voice. Because if you're anyone in the game, when you text, just like a text message, when you use text or chat in game, you can be whoever you want, and it's way more believable, right? Because then you, in your mind, I can see you as whoever you're portraying yourself to be in the game. And But when you get on voice and you're like, "What's up, bro?" It kind of kills it for me a little bit.
Yeah, it breaks immersion. It breaks immersion. Like I've tried doing the factions thing, or on Outlands, and you jump in there, and there's fucking people talking about, "Hey man, yeah, I'm high right now. I'm just doing this," and then they get in like little cocky fights. I can't believe he's putting boxes down. What the fuck? Like, who does that? It's like, shut the fuck up. Like, just play the game. And it breaks immersion, man. That's the bottom line. It breaks immersion, and it's the worst thing ever because it robs from what Ultima Online used to be. It robs from it.
Yeah, and especially, I mean, it does for, I think, the general player, but it really hurts us role players a little bit, because I'm not playing UO to talk about you being high. I'm playing it to run into a knight. I'm trying to see what a knight does when he's surrounded by 4 orcs in a forest. You know what I mean? What's the interaction there?
I want to be there. I want to live through it. I want to be there. I want to put everything into it so I can actually be there. That's where the awesomeness lies. That's where the coolness resides, is if you can actually be there as most you can, because then you're really in another world. That's what you want to do when you play a game. You want the immersion.
Yeah, and for the listener who may not be aware, the clan that we play with, and that's called the Bloodrock clan, of course, the oldest and greatest clan, but not the only clan. We have our own language that we use in game, and what we mean by that is if you're in game and you want to talk to another orc or another human, anyone, it doesn't matter. At all times, we never speak out of character. We don't speak out of character in our guild chat, which is a how would you call it, like almost like a custom chat that you can send a message to all your guildmates. Even there, we don't speak in English. We speak in Orcish. So what he's saying is we're sort of practicing what we preach, if you will, in that we try to keep that immersion. If you log into our clan and you're playing with us, you're going to hear Orcish and you're going to be an orc.
That's right.
I think that's the best part about it, man.
Oh, yeah. And another cool thing, our forts. On Great Lakes, we had a fort that we spent a lot of time inside of. We would tell stories. It was much smaller than the fort on Outlands. And you go in there, you sit on a log, you would wait for other orcs to naturally come in and just, do orcish things. And humans would come to the fort. Sometimes they would bring treasures. They'd be like, "I brought you some treasures for the orcs. They want something from us. They want us to kill someone. It could be a plethora of different things. And sometimes guilds would attack us. So then you'd have the orcs go on the walls. This is what was cool about those orc forts in those days. There was land around it where they could run all 360 around the fort. And you would be shooting arrows and magic at them, and they'd be shooting shit right back at you. Then they would muster enough forces to try to make a charge through the walls to kill all the orcs that are inside. And then a melee would ensue. They would be fighting each other. Spells would be casted. Walls of stone would be casted before they had a timer. Shitloads of walls of stones and a shitload of the spells. It added excitement. And there would just be a slaughter between humans and orcs, and a wonderful story left behind. And then we had other forts on different servers. Sorry, I'm going.
Yeah.
And those forts were kind of the same. But, they were just designed differently, where they had a whole bunch of land around them, and you could send orcs to run laps. Humans had different angles of attack. It added a cool dynamic to these fort battles. And a lot of Ultima Online players, vividly, whether they had an orc or not, they remember fighting orcs at the orc fort, and that was just an awesome experience that I hope we all get to experience again. Because right now, the current fort we have, it's awesome. It's amazing for events. The problem is there's not enough land around it where people can run around and find different angles of attack. I do wish we had another entrance to that fort, but we'll talk about that.
Yeah, and I think I remember when I first joined, I wanted to be an archer, right? So I had my shitty bow when I first joined it, and I think within the hour of me joining, we got raided, right? And I didn't even have armor. My strength probably wasn't even high enough to fucking I couldn't even carry or wear the armor. And I just remember they were like, "Get on the wall and shoot," and I was like, "Oh, but my levels," and I was complaining already. And I mean, within the hour, man, we're raided. We got overrun, but it was insanely fun. And I remember, at that point I realized, all right, this is what it's about. This is what it's about, and this is fun. who cares if we lose? We put up a fight. We put up a hell of a fight. And I think part of it is for the listener that, and again, Nero's the exception here back in 99, but we have few mages. Mages make up what, 10% maybe, if that, of our force knee?
Yeah, I'd say about 1 out of every 10 orcs is a mage.
Yeah, and a lot of that is kind of the history. We've always been that way. And one of the reasons I think is because we had a fort, right? A fort allowed us to be able to defend with just Dexers. The archers on the walls, the Dexers up front, blocking the entrance. We used the fort to our advantage and became, somewhat way more formidable because we had that structure to sort of lean on. And it's sort of coded in our DNA at this point, man.
It's coded in our DNA. And now what you'll see us is we'll get boxes and we'll try our best to make forts out in the wild, replicating those days. And humans, they use their pets to make the boxes disappear. It's, fuck, you asshole, our boxes disappear. Or they grab them and they run away. It's like, okay, this is still fun.
I need to hit the suggestion channel. If you have 120 carpentry, your boxes have a 50% chance of not being broken by pets.
That's great. But, the boxes pale in comparison to the fort, a good solid fort, but you want to talk about scars? Want to talk about how an orc ranks up?
Let's do. So one of the things in what Nee already sort of alluded to is that there always was a system in place, right? And we talked about that a little bit because he snuck in as a mage. However, back in those days, you joined and you were just a kind of shitbag orc, right? You were the lowest, I think, at that point. Snaga, was it?
Yeah, well, we called it peon, orc peon, and we also use snaga, which means orc peon in orcish. Personally, I prefer the English tags like orcish mage, orc brute, etc., so humans can see what the fuck we are.
Right.
And it's good for them because we play an intelligent monster. This is my opinion, so they can see what the hell we are. But yeah, you start off as, back then, a peon. Today, a snotling. And in those days, you would have to really show some merit. You'd have to build your accolades and just get yourself noteworthy enough so those who were above you could notice you and be like, it was a good old boy system. Be like, I think that peon is ready. He's ready to be a grunt now. Right. And this went on for a long time in a lot of different clans. There was the good old boy system, and the problem with the good old boy system is people who actually put in the work but were unnoticed they felt unfair. They were just unnoticed, but they put the work in. So in Outlands, I like to take the credit, but Dusgrim gave it the name, Scars. And I came up with the system. And it's where you earn these little markings beside your title that have a number attached to them, but they're runic. They're runic, where you don't see the number because that would break immersion. Right. They're like a little Xu'rek star, a little symbol that means a certain number. And once you get enough scars that you earn from doing quests and deeds and shit like that, you then progress to grunt. Then you got to get more scars to progress, and that is entirely up to you. The amount of effort that you put into the clan, and we are the only guild that does this and displays this on the titles.
And I think it's such a great practice. And even someone listening to this that has their own guild, maybe you have a 10-person guild, something small, and you have very light RP. Dude, the benefit of this for a new member is great because the probationary period is determined by the certain amount of effort that they're willing to put in. It's not a time thing. They don't create it and then a week later when they log back in, they're good to go. They got to do stuff and earn it. And I think that feels great because, and I talked about this with Xu'rek, but when our orcs level up, if you will, from snotling to peon or peon to grunt, there's some pride there, man, right? There's a lot of pride behind being able to upgrade and become like a higher ranking orc, and they've deserved it and earned it. And I think that's the critical part.
That's right. And, whenever you role play it really well, like Yogg being in this meat wagon in the forest, and he just role plays this obese orc that's just nasty and shit like that. You see that, you're like, you know what? He deserves a scar for that. He's doing a good job with the immersion. He is into his character, which is highly praised here if you get into the character that you play. And speaking of being into the character, I kind of want to talk about how you became the shaman of Krembluk, the shaman, the god of blood.
Yeah, no, definitely. And we've sort of alluded to this in me and Ern, but I want to hear your personal story because we talked about the ranks, but how did you upgrade? Because you started off as a mage, yes, but that doesn't mean you were shaman, right? So you had to work your way up to that.
Yeah, man. So I was just a young Mojaka. I had an orange robe on when I joined Bloodrock clan back in late '99, and I would follow the clan around, cast spells, healing players, and I would role play the young version of what I am now. And I was a worshiper of Belloc, like how the podcast started. That's what I had created my name for. I wanted to worship the god of death. His name is Belloc. And somewhere along those lines, when I became a mage, once I had a red robe on, and it signified that I was a full-pledged mage, the shaman of blood, Bidash is the shaman of blood. The god of blood is Krembluk. So Bidash gave me his title for shaman. He saw something that I possessed. Maybe it was just how much I was immersed into Nerul. And he gave me that. And I remember thinking, I made my character for Belloc. But now I fortuitously, this was just given to me. That's fucking cool. So then I embraced that, and I already channeled like this. I was really, and still am really into like heavy metal and punk music, and in a lot of metal bands, like there's a lot of sacrifices going on. And I was like, what a better way to really embrace the sacrificial stone than Krembluk. So then I performed so many sacrifices in the game where like I would find a human and I would just like sacrifice her. And then eventually, bloodletting everything. It was all about blood and sacrifices because it was badass. I'd be listening to Slayer in the background, Iron Maiden, while I was typing. And I would just like dive the dagger into, a human that we captured. And I had a little trick back then, which back then was a lot of shock value. Back then, like, oh shit, like I would rip the belly open, shove my hands in the belly, pull out this fetus, raise it to the sky, and kick it into the trees. And buddy, the orcs ate that shit alive. They loved it. They'd be screaming, "No, get out!" Because it was something of shock value. It was something no one's seen before in a video game. And that became my staple move, my little trademark move is
You're
just
like wrestling finisher,
Yeah, man, I'm just, and I got into that shit, man. I had a lot of fun. I embraced the madness, and I've been doing bloodletting and worshiping Grimblud since then.
Well,
and now
if you think about it, like that, you're also the shaman, the representative on Earth for us of the god of blood. I mean, you got to do something, right? And the second thing is like, dude, the human who experienced that, they're never gonna forget that shit. You know what I mean? Whether for better or for worse.
Exactly. And you got to think, this is like the shaman, the closest orc there is to the goddess of blood. So he's constantly like sacrificing things and spilling blood. The altar of sacrifice was my best friend.
Dude, and I think that it translates well because if we think about, or who we are today, this is back in those days. I think that still translates well, Nee, because a lot of the content that we see now on Outlands is very much log in, go to your shelf, click one button, get everything you need, right? Don't have to actually go through nothing. Go to your dungeon, farm, come back out. I think that's a lot of it. Even the factioning system, right? And this isn't a gripe about Outlands, but this is, and not that this is a bad thing, but the sort of lasting impacts that you're talking about, the moments like that where you're immersed in a character or you're witnessing someone else be immersed, it's kind of missing a little bit in Outlands.
It really is, and things like aspect armor don't help with the immersion. I wish on aspect armor is like whenever your armor turns like bright white or like bright purple, right, and different things whenever so those things kind of take away from what we're used to. Like whenever we have like we like to look all the same. Like we like to walk around and fight things the same. So I wish there was some type of like a guild prestige unlock thing for role-playing guilds, because immersion is really important to us, and we play the game differently than people do these days. We're one of the last guilds that really values true immersion into the game. We might be one of the only guilds out of every single game that still values high-level role-playing and immersion, like the old days in Ultima Online and the old RPG mods like Threshold, where you'd have to type and things. We are an archaic thing that somehow survived. We're really old. Our mindset's old. We stay true to what Richard Garriott was envisioning. That's what the fuck we are. We've survived.
Yeah, somehow, dude, somehow. But we are here, and it doesn't really, although obviously this is a podcast for orcs, and you and I are both in the same clan, but it doesn't necessarily have to be just for orcs, right? I imagine if we had a vampire guild, right? We have allies who are vampires. I'd want my guys to be in all black, maybe, right? I don't need one of my members in shiny, holy, yellow, bright armor, casting light everywhere,
And also the tin cans. We call knights tin cans because they're yummy inside and they're surrounded by metal. And that's just like a tin can. You crack open a can opener and you eat what's in there. So knights are tin cans. So the knights, I feel for them because you've got aspect armor, and all of a sudden their plate mail turns purple.
Right, or red, or and then you got to spin it somehow.
You're supposed to be a knight in shining armor when your armor's turning purple. There has to be a pathway of a prestige unlock for these role-playing guilds so their immersion can be protected.
And given that moment, I do want to give a shout out to the Knights Guild, the Sir Knights Guild in Outlands, who I think is our closest, frenemies, if you will, on the other side.
I'd say our closest equal.
Yeah, they're really good at what they do, and so they're one of our favorite enemies because, orcs and knights, that's as old as Warcraft days, right? The cover of Warcraft 1, right? Orcs and humans.
Oh man, let me tell you, whenever I found where we were going to reside on Outlands, this was the first time I ran into the Sir Guild. And I freshly found the Bloodrock Smuggler's Den cave, right? With the little rock bridge. And I think I was there with Zugu and some other, there weren't very many of us. I think it was like Pug Rock or something, just 3 warriors. And these knights found us. There were a handful of knights that found us, and this was literally the very first encounter of Sir and Bloodrock that I am aware of. And you had this noble knight thing in front of the cave, come out, ye, come here,
who goes there?
We're just like, what? We go out there, we're demanding tribute. Tribute, you say? And there's this really cool, understanding what the hell's going on here. And we ended up tricking one of their members into coming into the cave while another orc was distracting a knight.
Right.
And while the human, and we've got a picture somewhere about this, while the human was in the cave, we covered his mouth and we started cooking him. And he's just trying to scream. And the knights out there are carrying a conversation. Eventually the fumes reach outside the cave and there's just this fight that just breaks out. Right. And then after that, we all drink grog together, it was such a great encounter. And then there was other encounters afterwards where we would get captived and stuff like that. But yeah, the Knights Guild, wonderful guild. Good stuff.
And well, for the listener, and we're certainly not the only roleplay guild on Outlands, and there's more evil roleplay guilds, and there's more, if you will, good quote unquote. We argue we're the good guys, but good quote unquote guilds. And the Sir Knights are one of them. And what we do is we've set up sort of a relationship with them and the other guilds that's in game we're enemies, but we follow a rules of engagement with them. We have an established rules of engagement that we have mutually agreed make the game better for all of our players. And so it's such a great thing to have.
It is. And we appreciate them always being at war with us because that gives us the chance to role play with them and not just attack them. It gives us the chance, if our conversation goes the wrong way, we can clobber them and they can fight back. And back in the day, old Ultima, 1999, 98, 2000, 97, those days, we had the most amount of wars in all the servers. We have the record for the most amount of wars ever on Ultima Online, and we hold that title still today.
And I'm able to edit it, so if I'm able to edit it post-production, I'll show them that exact image of our war list.
And it actually was much higher than that number because it just kept swelling. And something I want to say is, back then when guilds would war us, because we were on Great Lakes, we weren't on Siege, or we weren't primarily on Siege. We were on Great Lakes, and there was stat loss. So we couldn't all be red. I mean, we just get fucking stat loss on Great Lakes. So we had to be creative, and we had to think of a way, well, how can we beat orcs and attack humans if we're just going to turn red and get stat loss? Oh, so Trug, our ancient elder, decided to war every single guild one at a time. He and in those days, those guild stones, and a lot of people remember this, those guild stones were archaic, dude. You would get on there, and you would have to literally war one guild at a time. Next page, and there would be a little bit of lag. There'd be a little bit of lag. War every single guild. Next page, and it all kind of blended together on that stone. It was a terrible, like it was bad, and this would take like half a day, like 6 to 7 hours to war every single guild, and then a lot of them would decline, so we'd have to filter through it again and war every single guild. We did this tediously, and eventually we had like half of the whole server warred with us. So you go to town, there's a shitload of orcs. You just look around and look for, and half of the humans were oranges. Imagine that.
Dude, have someone at the bank just sitting there or just going about their day and just fucking.
They would freak out. The orcs. And then, they would all start mustering like, and they would fight and stuff in dungeons, the same thing. Out in the wilderness, the same thing. And it became trendy to war the orcs. It was like, it became a trend where humans would talk to each other with their guilds and war us. That was cool. On Outlands, there's a button you can click for warring. Nobody uses it.
Yeah. And it sucks because we know the beauty that can be applied there, right? If everybody's orange, that means we can fight in a town, which means guess what? We can set up a fucking bank robbery. We can set up a whole town takeover. We can have a whole town defense, right? I mean, the beauty is there from the warring option that I think a lot of people don't utilize. We do our best. Our counterparts in Sur do their best, but yeah, I do wish it was seen more across the board.
That's right.
I got a question for you, Neat. This is just a personal one. I got to know your take on it. I feel like Outlands has its fair share of all kinds of players, as all servers do, right? It's not Outlands specific, but getting res killed here, getting griefed, you get griefed everywhere. Was it worse back in those days in 99, 2000, or is it worse now as from an orc's perspective? The griefing, the res killing, the dry looting, all that. Are these people? Are we whining today, the Outlanders? Are we whining for the easy days?
We're little bitches. We're little bitches. Oh, we're little bitches. Back in those days, the res kill reigned supreme. You would have humans waiting outside the res centers, like in Britannia, with like a vanquishing blessed war axe, and right when you res, you'd see like mounds of corpses everywhere. Res killing was totally a thing, and you can imagine these like 15-year-old kids.
Right. I killed you.
Exactly. You think it's bad today when you're at like Corpse Creek and someone res kills you, and there might be a little body. Back then, it reigned supreme. You can imagine what Richard Garriott was thinking. Like, what have I fucking done? I have created the online griefer. This is the birth of the online griefer.
And it's always been low-hanging fruit, right?
Right.
It's always easy pickings, man. You don't get anything, but it feels good to hear the death sound.
I will say, like, the whole dying a lot thing is a good test of character, test of will, test of how thick your skin is.
Right.
Because you get an orc that joins the clan, and they get like res killed a few times. They keep res killing me, and they would quit. You'd never see him again. It's like, okay, well, you need real thick skin to be an orc because this is hard mode in Ultima Online. You're playing hard mode, dude. Your gear is restricted. You don't get a mount back in those days. You are just playing Ultima Online hard mode. You got to take a res kill, and you know.
Yeah, in our number one rule for our guild, we won't go down every rule, but the one rule that we tell every new member, no whining, right? We don't want whiners. You're gonna die. You're gonna die a lot. We die a lot. Leadership die. Everybody fucking dies. We all die. You know, we all get dry looted. We all get res killed. It's a thing. Get used to it a little bit.
That's correct. Yeah, no whining at all. And sometimes, there would always be a complication between role-playing guild to another role-playing guild, like someone being accused of getting looted by a different player from a different guild. And in those days, we had a special character that Shrug had that had, what was it called? Forensic evaluation, where he would use that on corpses to see who the fuck looted that corpse, because that skill would tell you who looted that corpse, and you could see it. We were very, very strict in those days, and Trug ruled with an iron rod. And I think that laid the foundation on who we are today. We kept that constitution that we had back then, and we kept that throughout 27 years or however many years we've been around since 1998. And we have hugged that Constitution. We have protected it. And there have been many times where things have come up to infringe in those old ways. And so we take steps carefully on how we change this guild in the spirit of that original foundation that Shrug laid down, that constitutional high restrictions, and do things meticulously and carefully. And don't be afraid to take a step back if you make a wrong decision. But always obsess over the decisions we make and make sure we hone things as best as we can. And then on top of that, do it again.
And one of the things that I think is wonderful, probably the biggest thing I think that distinguishes us is the fact that we, generally speak, there's very few exceptions, but overall, we never just attack on sight. And I love that about it. So a lot of us are red. We play red orcs and we encounter humans in the wild. We don't just, our goal is always RP first. And I think that's a breath of fresh air for a lot of people who run into us and they realize, hey, these guys aren't just going to PK me, as soon as they see me, just sync dump me. We always RP first.
And there's a lot of misconception because some humans are like, well, he attacked me. I didn't attack back. I did attack back. But if you run from someone asking for tribute, if an orc goes up to you and is like, give tribute, and you start running, that you're free ground. You're like, okay, what would happen if, you run away from a fucking tiger? The tiger is going to chase you. Do you have any meat to throw on the ground to distract the tiger? You know what I mean? Like, you gotta feed the orc gold, or the orc will attack you. If you don't have gold, you've got something else. Do you have blessed shoes on? Do you have a riddle to tell the orc to distract him? Do you have a dance you can do to distract the orc?
Right.
And the game here is survival, and your job is to riddle the orc like the Hobbit did with Smaug, where the barrel rider keep the dragon distracted while you sneak away. You've got to do something. You can't just run because he'll attack you. And I want to go back to talking about our the way we carefully protect that constitution. Like the gear we use today. Outlands gave us a plethora of different armors, new weapons, new clothing, new all of these things that Outlands keeps introducing. This is very difficult for a clan like us because we're used to only so many items back in the OSI days. So everything new that's released, you are literally testing an ancient guild, an ancient clan that's been holding things one specific way the whole time. But we understand in order to survive, we have to adapt. So we have to look at all this new gear like under a microscope. Does this look badass enough for an orc? And then you have the leering council. No, that looks like shit.
Right. Back in my day, we fucking,
So then we're filtering everything being released and tastefully selecting things that can maintain that constitution that we're protecting. And we're going to have to do that from here on out. One day we might have to jump into a new game. I'm not saying we will, but if that ever comes up, we have to maintain that constitution.
Yeah, and I think, a good example, Nee, is the new bows, and I think there's a couple of maces with a skull on it, and we're like, okay, that one flies. But it does feel weird when it, you have orcs who've been using the heavy X bow since 1999, right? And now we're like, oh shit, there's a new one? No, that's not us. I've been using this motherfucker for 25 years, so it's a little bit of that.
And we don't even allow lanterns. Like a lot of humans use lanterns. Orcs, you'll sometimes see them with a lantern, and you got to talk to them. Like, hey man, we hold torches. We don't even hold the color. We don't even hold the goofy looking torches. I mean, I guess you can get away with them, but we much rather prefer the old school Ultima Online torch because it's got that nostalgia to it. It's got those original graphics to it. It's got memories attached to it, and it just looks the part. But a whole bunch of we don't even use emotes. You know how you can unlock emotes and stuff?
Right.
We don't even use them. We prohibit emotes. There's only one class that can use emotes, and that's the Howler. A Howler is like a tamer, right? You helped come out with this. You were the first. You pushed this one, and the Howler may howl. That's it.
That's
the Howler howls because he's
one.
Yeah, he howls because he's a Howler. Simple, done, tasteful.
And I would argue with anyone, low light levels, original torch, best fucking visuals in the game. You're in a dark place, you got your orange torch. I make crappy videos of like our events and stuff, and I try to put together videos for us. And a dark room with that light, the best. As soon as you start getting like the purple lights and stuff, to me, it's like, for us again. For someone else, different story. For us, you gotta have the old school torch, man. That's my go-to. It's the best one.
Getting to Outlands was an adventure in itself. I mean, we played OSI forever, and then one day we had to take ships to Angel Island. A lot of people remember Angel Island. We had to sail to Angel Island, and that was a lot easier to settle into because they were the old ways. Plus a little sprinkle of things like poisoned archery, like poisoned arrows and things like that. But it was a lot closer to what we were used to. Then we jumped on to like Ultima Online Renaissance. I'm not going to get the order right, but I remember Renaissance, Lost Lands, Second Age, Game of Clones, which was very short-lived, and then finally Legacy before we jumped on to Outlands. And I remember looking to jump over to Outlands, and we waited. Like the server launched, and I didn't want to jump in because aspect armor scared me. I thought it was like I thought it was Trammy. I logged on, I'm like, what the hell is this? Aspect armor, like you got purple, you got weird. I'm like an old dude that used to, like just ride a horse everywhere, and all of a sudden everybody's in fucking Ferraris. I'm like, what?
Yeah, it's a different way to play the game, but we've been able to adapt a lot of it. So a lot of our orcs. We have, for example, one of our classes is the Brute, and this will be for another episode. We can go down the special ranks and stuff, but the Brute class is exactly what you think it is. They're the meatheads up front, got hit in the head one too many times. They got the shield on, they got the heavy armor on. They absorb the damage. And
Brutes are allowed to wear like plate mill arms. They're allowed to have plate mill hands. They're allowed to have like specific shields. Like they're allowed a few more things so they can like emerge into that Brute character. Go on, sorry.
Yeah, no, yeah. And another thing that they do is like in the PVM world, right? If we go do a boss as orcs, we're all drunk and shit. We're kind of half-ass doing it. But the good Brutes that we have, and we have quite a few of them, they're able to level up their aspects, whatever aspect they may, earth aspect or whatever it may be, and they can tank a boss. So yes, we prefer them not to be colorful, but they're able to at least immerse part of their role, which is being a tank. Correct. And they roll into the PVM side with it, which I think is cool. It opens up an avenue for
it. Kept us alive. I remember there was pretty recently Yogg, and I think it was Wog. Forgive me if I fuck this up, but there were humans attacking us while we were doing a boss on the beach. And then suddenly, Fizzle Mage found us. He's like,
oh Fizzle Mage, yes, he found
it. So Yogg and Wog are tanking this boss while we're fighting off Fizzle Mage and this group of misfits. And they're just trying to interrupt us and shit. We're doing the boss. And the Brutes really, those characters, those heavily armored orcs, really held it up. We killed the boss ultimately. We looted the boss. We got out of there. We killed Fizzle Mage and all of his little miscreants. And we got out of there successfully. We had grogs, and it was all thanks to that character class, the Brute.
Yeah, the Brutes. And another thing that was beautiful is that one of our special techniques, if you will, not unique to us, but one thing that we focus on is cross healing, right? And that's embedded in our any orc worth his weight in salt knows to cross heal. And those guys kept each other up using those techniques. You know, they were up there just healing each other, depending on one another. And
That's right.
in the back line, shooting at Fizzle Mage, we had, I don't know if you remember, two shitty snotlings with no aspect armor. Just, they're red. They're just hanging out with us.
Yeah. They're like shooting their little plinky arrows at Fizzle Mage and shit.
Yeah.
I'm trying to trap them in that little cove beach area.
Yeah, I think I forget the snots, but yeah, it was like 2 or 3 people that were back there. No aspect, contributing nothing to the boss, but they're hanging out with us, and it seems to work out, and we have fun doing it, right? So other people can do a boss, not utter a single word while they do it, just, you know, clock in, clock out. We have adventures when we do these things, man.
Adventures. Another cool adventure we had, man. So when Wildlands came out recently, I'm going to say recently. I don't know how long it's been, man. It's probably been like
a year now, no? 6
It's probably been a year. It feels like a year.
Yeah.
So when Wildlands came out, right before it was released, everyone was anticipating jumping in and running around Wildlands. Right when it was released and the servers came up, we decided not to take a moon gate like most people. We decided not to get there by any means except by a dragon ship. So you had a lot of orcs, it was like 30 of us that got on this dragon ship, and we're all mounted to the teeth. We're all armed to the teeth, and we're on this dragon ship going through like mobs and stuff, sailing to Wildlands while everyone's taking the moon gate. We hit the shore and we jump off the ship, and mind you, we're listening to Viking metal while we're doing this.
Yeah, dude, intense.
We're listening to Viking metal, and with dark wolves that we're riding on, we just start slaying humans left and right. A big group of orcs with torches, and Bloodrock, the war chief, the greatest war chief. He needs his own episode one day. Amazing war chief. We slaughtered so many humans. We must have killed 500. We just kept slaughtering, and the Viking music's just blaring. Killing the shit.
Dude, you know what it reminded? In my head, what that felt like is like a family goes on vacation and they're sitting in this beautiful beach, a new place, and they're just like looking around, and then just a mob of hooligans come and just run them off. You know, it's just we sort of ruined the event, but hey, we're screaming Orcish war chants and shit. It was hilarious.
Oh my God, that was badass, man. It's moments like that that really make it worthwhile. this whole damn thing, man. It's so awesome. And those type of instances happen here and there. It's pockets of awesomeness.
They seem to find us, man. I always tell everybody, like, we do events or whatever, it never goes as planned, but it always seems to work out and be fun, because I think everyone's mindset is, you know, focusing on the adventure first. And so when you approach anything like that and you spin it that way, it seems to work out. And I remember one event, I think one of our then captains, Grizzlog, held an event, and it got ruined by Reds, you know, the griefers or whatever. And he had a bit of a story behind it, but instead of just bitching about it, what he do? He spun it, and everybody armored up and chased them to their guild house, and it became a crazy event. Just not intent. You know, when you approach the game with that in mind, you can always spin it your way. There's some times where you just totally get wrecked, right? And you just, oh, fuck this game or whatever. But most of the time, man, it's if you have the right mentality, which I think Bloodrock gives us, dude, you can spin the shit and have fun with it, man, no matter what.
Speaking of spinning shit, like a lot of humans and role players, all the likes listening to this, you all remember Slaughter Moon. That if you play Ultima Online, Outlands, you know what the hell Slaughter Moon is. And recently, Slaughter Moon is just on Saturdays at a specific time when we go out and we slaughter everybody.
And in our defense, we announce it with the Blood Moons, right? We announce it in Discord.
That's right. So we have changed Slaughter Moons because we don't want to just be idiot PKs. That's not us. We're not just some group of guilds that are just idiot PKs that kill people and don't roleplay. None of that shit. So I'm just trying to redesign it where we don't do that, but you gotta mess with it with a needle. So we're calling Slaughter Moons, once known Slaughter Moons, Bloodrock Nights. And the way that it's called a Bloodrock Night, it's a blood moon in the sky. Orcs call a blood moon a Bloodrock. That's a Bloodrock.
Right.
We're the Blood Moon clan, the Bloodrock clan. And we go out there, Bloodrock Night, we just kill humans, but we're asking for tribute. We're going at a different angle, trying new things. But yeah, Bloodrock Night is what we call it now, and we're trying to step away from that mindless killing thing. Uh, we're not trying to ruin anybody's fun here, you know.
Right, right.
But we got to be orcs at the same time, so we're just in the process of figuring out how the fuck we're going to approach this.
Last thing, what to you is the most important thing about Bloodrock, man, and what would be the best benefit to somebody if they joined us tomorrow?
Oh my God, the most important thing in the Bloodrock is that we are a form of art. Anything done well is considered art, and we're on a quest of constant improvement. We improve upon improvement upon improvement. And a message for anyone else is, if you're interested in making an orc, make it. You're going to get something out of it, whether it's stories, whether it's lessons. It's going to be the funnest experience you've ever experienced in Ultima Online, and it's an original idea that's been going on for 27 years.
Awesome, man. Well, hey, Nee, I really appreciate you jumping on, man. It was a great time.
Hey, thanks for having me. I look forward to a future podcast, maybe further down the road. But this is great. I'm liking this, man.
Yeah, it'll be fun, man, and we'll definitely do another one. Googie, man.
Googie.
Well, that does it for this episode of the Orc Fort podcast. I want to thank Nero for coming on. He is an absolute legend in our clan, a true elder, and I'm glad that we're able to hear a little bit about where he comes from, where the clan comes from, and how far we've come. Thank you for listening, and we hope to drop these as soon as we get them. So more to come, definitely a whole lot more to come, and I want to thank you again for tuning in. Have a good one.